Listen, I know you're here because you've got compost ready to go, and you're standing there with your shovel, wondering if you're about to make a rookie mistake or give your plants the best gift ever. Maybe both? I've been there, trust me. After years of experimenting in my own garden and hearing from thousands of you in the Grow with Soil community, I can tell you that getting your compost to soil ratio right is one of those game-changing skills that separates okay gardens from absolutely thriving ones. So let's dig in and figure out exactly how much compost your soil needs. Here's what most gardening articles won't tell you. You can absolutely have too much of a good thing when it comes to compost. I know. It sounds counterintuitive. Compost is amazing, right? It feeds your plants, improves drainage in clay soil, helps sandy soil hold water, and basically makes everything better. But dump too much in, and you'll end up with plants that grow like crazy, but produce almost nothing. Or worse, you'll create conditions where diseases thrive and roots struggle. Think of it this way. Your soil is like a recipe, and compost is one incredibly powerful ingredient. You wouldn't dump an entire container of vanilla extract into a cake batter just because vanilla makes things taste good. The same principle applies here. We're looking for that sweet spot where compost enhances your soil without overwhelming it. Finding that balance means understanding what you're working with and what your plants actually need. Let me give you the ratio I come back to again and again. 1 part compost to 2 or 3 parts existing soil. That translates to roughly 25 to 33% compost by volume. This is your reliable baseline for vegetable gardens, flower beds, and most general gardening situations. When I'm amending an existing bed, I spread about 2 to 3 inches of compost across the surface and work it into the top 6 to 8 inches of soil. This gives you that beautiful blend where the compost improves everything without taking over. Your soil gets better structure, more beneficial microbes, improved water retention, and a steady nutrient supply, while still maintaining the drainage and texture that healthy roots demand. Now, if you're working with brand new raised beds or creating garden space from scratch, you've got more flexibility. I'll often go with a richer mix, sometimes up to 50% compost, especially in that first year. But here's the key. I'm using fully finished, well-aged compost that's been breaking down for at least 6 months. This stuff is stable, mellow, and won't cause the nutrient imbalances that fresher compost can create. Your existing soil completely changes the equation, and this is where things get really interesting. Heavy clay soil is like working with concrete when it's dry and sticky mud when it's wet. It needs serious help, and compost is your best friend here. For clay, I'm not shy about going heavy on the compost, sometimes working in equal parts compost and existing soil when I'm first establishing a bed. The organic matter literally transforms clay by creating spaces between those tight particles, allowing water to drain and roots to penetrate. Sandy soil sits at the opposite end of the spectrum. It drains so fast that water and nutrients, well, they just wash right through before plants can use them. Compost acts like a sponge in sandy soil, holding on to moisture and nutrients so your plants can actually access them. I use a similar generous approach here, often mixing in 35 to 40% compost to give sandy soil some staying power. If you're lucky enough to start with loamy soil, that gorgeous, dark, crumbly stuff that's every gardener's dream, you need much less compost. An annual top dressing of 1 to 2 inches, either worked in lightly or left on the surface as mulch, keeps loamy soil in peak condition without overdoing it. Sometimes the best thing we can do is simply maintain what's already working. Containers are their own universe with their own rules. And honestly, this is where you can be more generous with compost. Container soil needs to be lighter and fluffier than garden soil because there's nowhere for excess water to go. Poor drainage in a pot spells disaster fast. For my container vegetables, especially heavy feeders like tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers, I use a mix that's about 40 to 50% compost, with the rest being quality potting mix and some perlite or vermiculite for extra drainage. This combination gives container plants the nutrients they need while ensuring water can move through the soil properly. I've grown stunning tomatoes in containers with this mix, plants that rival anything in my ground beds. For containers with perennials or woody plants, I pull back to about 30% compost. These plants generally prefer leaner conditions and can actually suffer from too much richness. Herbs, especially Mediterranean types like rosemary, lavender, and thyme, do best with even less compost, around 20%. These plants evolved in rocky, nutrient-poor soils, and they'll reward your restraint with intense flavors and robust growth. Different plants have wildly different nutritional needs, and adjusting your compost ratio accordingly makes a huge difference. Heavy feeders absolutely love compost-rich soil. So I'm talking about tomatoes, corn, squash, cucumbers, most brassicas, and those really hungry annual flowers like sunflowers and zinnias. For these plants, it's best to lean toward the higher end of the range. Honestly, even pushing to 35 or 40% compost in your garden beds can make a big difference. Leafy greens, well, they fall into kind of a middle category. They definitely appreciate good nutrition, but they just don't need as much as those fruiting crops do. Around 25 to 30% compost is usually perfect to keep lettuce, spinach, and kale happy without, pushing them to bolt too early. Root vegetables actually taught me a pretty important lesson about compost, and it's really about quality versus quantity. Carrots, parsnips, beets, and other root crops need loose, obstacle-free soil to develop properly. If there's too much fresh, chunky compost, it can cause the roots to fork, split, or just grow in some weird shapes. For root crops, I use compost that's been fully decomposed for at least a year, nice and fine, and I keep it to about 20 to 25% of the mix. The payoff is long, straight, beautiful roots. Legumes like peas and beans actually fix their own nitrogen from the air, so they need less nitrogen-rich compost. About 15 to 20% compost gives them the other nutrients they need without overwhelming their unique abilities. Same goes for garlic and onions, which prefer moderate fertility. Not all compost is created equal, and this dramatically affects how much you should use. Fresh compost that's only been cooking for a couple of months is still actively decomposing. It's hot, it's dynamic, and it can actually tie up nitrogen in your soil as it continues to break down. This temporarily starves your plants of the very thing you added the compost to provide. Well-aged compost, the kind that's been sitting and mellowing for 6 months to a year or longer, is completely different. It's stable, cool, and fully decomposed into that dark, crumbly, sweet-smelling stuff that looks almost like coffee grounds. This is the compost you can use more liberally without worry. When I'm working with compost that's been aging for a year or more, I'm comfortable going toward the higher end of all my recommendations. The source matters too. Homemade compost from kitchen scraps and yard waste has a different nutrient profile than mushroom compost, which tends to be quite alkaline and salty. I use mushroom compost sparingly, keeping it to about 15 to 20% of my mix and never using it around acid-loving plants. Composted manure is incredibly concentrated and should really be treated more like a fertilizer than a soil amendment. I keep manure-based compost to about 10 to 15% maximum, and I always make sure it's been composted for at least 6 months to kill pathogens and weed seeds. Your plants will tell you if you've got the ratio right. You just need to know what to look for. Healthy, balanced growth with good fruit or flower production means you've nailed it. Plants that grow enormous with lush, dark green foliage but produce little to no fruit are getting too much nitrogen, usually from too much compost. If you see this, dial back your compost ratio next season. Slow growth, pale leaves, and poor yields suggest your soil needs more organic matter. Increase your compost percentage gradually, maybe by 5 to 10%, and see how your plants respond. Gardening is always an experiment, and every plot of land has its own personality. Taking notes on what works in your specific situation turns you into an expert on your own garden faster than any book or video ever could. The beautiful thing about getting your compost ratio right is that it's not complicated once you understand the principles. Start with that trusty 25 to 30% ratio for general garden beds. Adjust based on your soil type and what you're growing, and pay attention to how your plants respond. Give clay and sand more compost. Give loamy soil less. Feed the heavy feeders and go easy on the plants that prefer leaner conditions. Use well-aged compost whenever possible, and don't be afraid to adjust as you learn what works in your unique garden. If this guide helped you figure out your compost strategy, do me a favor and subscribe to Grow with Soil so you never miss our practical, real-world gardening advice. Share this article with your gardening friends who might be scratching their heads over their own compost questions, and drop a comment below telling me about your compost experiences. What ratio works best for you? Have you made any compost mistakes that taught you valuable lessons? I genuinely read every comment and love learning from this amazing community. Now get out there and make some incredible soil.